He always insisted that black people were born inferior to white people. To prove his point, he sawed open a black man's skull. The inside of this man's occipital bone had 3 distinct indentations that white people don't have. He claimed this was the root cause of slavery in black people. He then hastily concluded that black people were inferior to white people from the bone. Therefore, white people have always treated black people like animals, trading them however they pleased. They exploited their labor as they saw fit, taking away their freedom for life. But were black people born with the slave mentality, willing to be at others' beck and call? It's truly upside down, a world where natural order has gone completely haywire. Not only did the white men mock him, but even his black brethren looked down on him, which instantly enraged him. Before the white man could even draw his gun, he already had his gun pointed at him. What surprised people even more was that he not only enjoyed the same privileges as white men, but also dared to kill those evil white men. For the dawn of black freedom, he is Django. But just a few months ago, Django was still a slave waiting to be sold at the market, an iron collar around his neck, his steps dragging as the slave traders herded him like cattle. Suddenly, a wagon with a giant tooth on top came rolling up. The man on it claimed to be a dentist and wanted to buy a slave to work for him. The dentist specifically asked for a black man who had worked at the plantation. As luck would have it, Django was just the right fit for this requirement. The dentist approached Django to talk, seeing them whispering to each other. The slave trader immediately got on guard, raised his gun, and insisted that Django was not for sale. Seeing this, the dentist didn't waste any more words with him. He raised his hand. One shot blew off the head of one guy, and then he shot the other's horse in the head. After this lightning-fast move, the dentist still didn't forget his manners and came forward to apologize. "I'm sorry, but you threatened me with violence first." Then he went to Django, confirmed his question once again, and untied him. Unlike those white slave owners, the dentist not only let Django with the slave trader's cotton jacket, but he also let him ride a horse instead of walking. Seeing the countless scars on Django's back, the dentist was deeply moved. Then he made it seem like he was paying for the slave, and just like that, he led his newly bought Django away. The next day, the two arrived in a small town. Everywhere they went, people looked at them with astonishment. A black man who wasn't even worthy of shackles was riding a horse. It was truly a world turned upside down. But the dentist didn't have a single prejudice, just leading Django straight into the saloon. This action scared the living daylights out of the saloon owner, who only served white people. He immediately ran outside to call for help, while the dentist casually sat and drank beer with Django. Soon after, the sheriff came in, gun in hand, and ordered the two to leave the saloon for questioning, with a dart gun barrel pointed at them. They had no choice but to obediently walk out. But before the sheriff could even ask a couple of questions, the dentist suddenly drew his gun and shot the sheriff dead in one shot. Before he could even crawl back up, the dentist fired another shot. The crowd of onlookers scattered in fear. This act even shocked Django, who was with him. Hearing the news, the marshal immediately led his men to surround the saloon, demanding the two surrender. But the dentist inside the saloon wasn't fazed at all. He calmly walked out with a stack of papers in hand. Turns out, he was a bounty hunter. The sheriff he shot dead was a criminal the government had been after for 2 years. Not only did he not have to take responsibility, but the marshal also had to reward him with $200. Looking at the documents in his hand, the marshal had no choice but to let them go. While they were resting on the road, the dentist finally revealed the reason he bought Django. It turned out his current main target was the three Brittle brothers. They had changed their names many years ago, and the dentist couldn't recognize them, so he needed help. And Django, who knew them, naturally became the top choice. The dentist promised that after everything was done, he would not only give Django a sum of money, but also give him his freedom. Then he asked Django, "If you were free, what would you do?" Django, with a serious look on his face, replied, "I'd go find my wife." It turned out that with his rebellious nature, he and his wife had tried to escape before, but they were caught by their slave owner not long after. To punish Django, the slave owner purposely sold him and his wife to different places. Since then, he hasn't seen his wife again. Now, finding his wife was the only motivation for him to keep going. Upon hearing that the three Brittle brothers might be hiding out on a plantation, to avoid raising suspicion, The dentist disguised himself as a wealthy merchant. Then he let Django choose an outfit he liked and told him to pretend to be his assistant, a black man in fancy clothes riding a horse. The sight was both unbelievable and ridiculous. As expected, the plantation owner, upon seeing Django dressed so extravagantly, looked very displeased. In his mind, black people had no right to enjoy such things. The dentist saw through it all and didn't want to waste time, so he cut straight to the chase, saying he was there to buy slaves at a high price. The plantation owner's attitude immediately changed, and he hastily invited the two inside. While the dentist and the plantation owner were discussing the deal, Django took the opportunity to search for his target on the plantation. By asking a female house servant, he quickly located the three Brittle brothers. When he saw that face, in an instant, the old memories flooded back into Django's mind. It was the very man who had whipped him years ago. Right then, he was about to whip another female slave. Seeing this, Django, with a face full of rage, approached. Just as the female slave was about to be struck, he appeared like a sudden savior, stopping it. Seeing a slave dressed so finely, the Brittle brothers couldn't believe their eyes. Before they could even react, Django raised his hand and shot one dead, then knocked another to the ground with a whip. Seeing this scene, the surrounding black slaves were all stunned into silence. They couldn't imagine that a black man would dare to hit a white man on a slave plantation, so many curious slaves gathered around. After venting his anger, Django, in front of everyone, drew his gun and ended the life of the second one. At the same time, hearing the commotion, the dentist rushed over. Realizing there was still one left, he quickly raised his gun. That one was riding a horse trying to escape, but in the end, he still couldn't outrun the dentist's marksmanship. Hearing the gunshots, the plantation owner came running with a posse on horseback. The dentist pulled out his old trick again, presenting his bounty hunter credentials. Although the owner was furious inside, faced with a legally authorized arrest warrant, he had to swallow his anger. Just like that, the dentist and Django carried the three bodies out. But as soon as night fell, the plantation owner led a group on horseback to chase after them. A black man daring to kill people on his plantation was something he absolutely could not tolerate. However, the bounty hunting dentist was no slouch either. He had anticipated that the slave owner would do this, so he secretly planted a lot of explosives on the wagon. When they got close to the wagon to check it out, the dentist, hiding in the mountains, only needed one shot to accurately detonate the wagon. Half of the slave owner's men were instantly killed, and the remaining ones fled in terror. Seeing the slave owner still alive and trying to escape, the dentist handed his rifle to Django. Unexpectedly, Django took down the plantation owner with just one shot. This natural marksmanship astonished the dentist. With the threat resolved, the two could finally relax and have a meal. Seeing that Django was a natural talent, the dentist said, "How about you keep working with me? After this winter ends, I'll help you find your wife." And he also promised to give Django 1/3 of the bounty for each job. Hearing this, Django, although a bit skeptical, agreed immediately. After all, what could be better than getting to kill white men and getting paid for it? The next day, Django changed into a new trench coat. The two bought new horses, and from then on, one black, one white. They embarked on the road of bounty hunting. That day, the two arrived at a hillside preparing to carry out a new mission. Because the wanted criminal's son was always by his side, Django aimed at the target but couldn't pull the trigger. He still held on to a shred of kindness towards the world. To encourage him, the dentist took out the wanted poster of the criminal, recounted each of his crimes of murder and robbery, and frankly said that upon completion of the mission, they would receive a $7,000 reward. Finally, Django didn't hesitate any longer and pulled the trigger, ending him. In the following time, the two continuously carried out bounty hunting missions. Django also accumulated a great deal of practical experience. His draw speed became faster and faster, and his accuracy improved significantly. With their seamless cooperation, even difficult missions facing a whole gang of criminals were easily completed. Just like that, the whole winter passed in the blink of an eye, and the two had earned more than enough money. The next mission was to find Django's wife. First, they went to a small town, known as the hub of the slave trade. By checking the transaction records, the dentist quickly found Django's wife. She had been sold to a notorious plantation. and the plantation owner was an inhumane white man named Candy. However, if they simply wanted to buy a female slave and went to deal with Candy, it wasn't feasible. Stealing her directly would violate the law, and outright robbery wasn't guaranteed to succeed either. Therefore, the dentist devised another cunning plan. Django would pose as a slave trader specializing in black fighters. They would spend a large sum of money to buy a group of fighters and conveniently buy Django's wife as well. But they didn't expect Candy to be such a simple person. He was even a frenzied and arrogant madman. When the dentist and Django arrived at Candy's mansion, there were many black slaves there. They had assigned tasks, and each had a suitable position. Under the guidance of his lawyer, the two met Candy, the legendary villain. Unlike other slave owners, Candy discriminated against the black slaves around him, even favoring the beautiful female slaves. At this moment, two black fighters were fighting fiercely in the room. The people around them couldn't bear to watch this bloody scene. Only Candy became more and more excited as he watched. Finally, he threw a hammer at the winner, ordering him to finish off the loser. Facing such an inhuman person, Django showed no fear. Even when speaking, he carried a provocative tone. Although Candy felt offended, he still tried to suppress his anger. After all, no one would make things difficult for those who brought their own money to bet. Right then, the dentist quickly played along. If there is a suitable one, I am willing to pay a sky-high price of $12,000. This huge amount of money immediately piqued Candy's interest. The next day, Candy led the two to his arena, where his strongest fighters were. Along the way, Django completely immersed himself in the role of a slave trader. Faced with the ridicule of a white man, he immediately fought back, even knocking both the man and his horse to the ground. Seeing that a conflict was about to break out between the two sides, Candy intervened in time. Continuing on their way, to further solidify his identity, Django loudly warned the black slaves nearby, even bluntly saying they were just a bunch of fools. This action not only caught Candy's attention, but even the dentist became tense. So he quickly advised Django not to do anything stupid to anger Candy anymore, otherwise they would all die there. Although Django knew he was acting, something had changed inside him. As they approached the farm, they discovered a black fighter trying to escape. The black man, chased by white men with dogs, climbed a tree and didn't dare to come down. Seeing this, Candy quickly told everyone to pull the dogs back and then pretended to say to the black man, "It's okay, come down." It turned out that this black man was bought by Candy for $500, and now he wanted to run away before he had even competed in a single match. This made Candy extremely angry. The dentist, well aware of Candy's cruel methods, quickly said that he was willing to pay to buy this black man. Unexpectedly, Django, a black man just like him, suddenly spoke up, "We don't need to waste a single penny on him." Django knew that this kindness would only arouse suspicion, so the dentist had to withdraw his kindness. Candy found it very confusing. However, with his cunning nature, he wasn't about to let this go. Candy calmly walked up to Django. "If you don't want to save him, then I'll show you a good show." He ordered his subordinates to release the dogs to bite the black fighter to death. Django had no other choice, so he had to pretend to be ruthless. Only in this way could he gain Candy's trust. Not long after, everyone arrived at Candyland. The butler was an old, one-legged black slave. He had served the Candy family for decades, and the slave mentality was deeply ingrained in his bones. Although he was black, he wholeheartedly protected the interests of the white people. So when he saw Django riding a horse, he couldn't help but curse. Only when Candy revealed Django's identity did he stop grumbling. He simply couldn't allow any black person to have a higher status than himself. Candy's sister also came out to greet them. Knowing beforehand that Django's wife could speak German, the dentist took this opportunity to request a German-speaking female slave to serve him in the evening so that they could close the next deal. Candy immediately agreed and instantly said the name of Django's wife. However, the old butler said it wasn't very convenient, as she had tried to escape a few days ago and was currently locked in a dark cellar. The so-called dark cellar was just a box buried in the ground. Seeing his wife being tortured like this, Django was heartbroken, but for the greater good, he had to endure it for the time being. Not long after, Broomhilda was brought to the dentist's room, looking beautiful and splendid. To avoid being overheard, the dentist spoke to her in German and asked her to remain calm no matter what she saw. While Brumhilde was still in a daze, the door slowly opened and Django appeared, shining brightly. The long-separated couple was finally reunited. Seeing Django in this manner, Brumhilde was so happy that she fainted. The next plan still had to continue. During dinner, the dentist presented a list of fighters he wanted to buy and argued with Candy about it for a while. He didn't care who Candy sold. All he cared about was how to take Django's wife with them. At this time, Django was trying to suppress his joy at reuniting with his wife, pretending to discuss the selection of fighters at the dinner table. However, Brumhilde, as a female slave, couldn't hide her excitement. During this time, she kept looking at Django meaningfully. This action was quickly noticed by the butler, so he concluded that the two must have known each other before. Then he pulled Brumhilde into the kitchen to interrogate her. Although he received denials in response, he still didn't give up. At the dinner table, Django deliberately lowered the price. The dentist took the opportunity to raise the price to continue to stabilize Candy. The two worked together seamlessly and successfully closed the $12,000 deal. However, the transaction wouldn't happen for another 5 days. Faced with such a huge sum of money, Candy was naturally overjoyed. Just as the business was settled, he wanted to find some amusement. So, at the butler's instigation, Brumhilde's clothes were stripped off in front of everyone, revealing her back, which was covered in scars. For Candy, a back like that represented his accomplishments. Seeing this, Django was so furious he wanted to draw his gun, but for the greater good, he once again suppressed his anger. Fortunately, Candy's sister arrived in time to end this farce. However, by observing Django's reaction, the butler became even more certain of his suspicions, so he dragged Brumhilde into the kitchen to interrogate her, demanding to know what her relationship with Django was. On the other side, the dentist finally revealed his true purpose. Now that the big deal was done, why not just sell that black slave girl to him as well? Hearing this, Candy didn't refuse. On the contrary, he was secretly happy because he was about to get another large sum of money. But just as they were about to finalize the deal, the butler suddenly barged in, interrupting everyone's conversation, and called Candy into the study for a private talk. In the study, the butler and Candy sat opposite each other, holding glasses of wine. As an elder, he advised Candy, "Their goal isn't the fighters, it's that female slave. From my observations, she's most likely Django's wife." At this moment, Candy suddenly realized he had been tricked, but with his cruel nature, the most important thing was to hide his thoughts. When he returned to the dinner table, he had a box in his hand. When he opened it, inside was a skull. Its owner was a black slave even older than the butler, who had served Candy's ancestors. Therefore, Candy temporarily put aside the business deal and made veiled remarks about the slave nature of black people. He bluntly stated that this dead butler had shaved his grandfather for decades. Every time he held the razor, he had the opportunity to kill his master. But even until his death, he didn't do it. The only reason was a submissive slave nature deeply ingrained in his bones. After that, Candy even took out the butler's occipital bone for everyone to see. According to him, all black people were born slaves. At this point, he suddenly exposed the dentist and Django's scheme and ordered his men to confiscate their guns. Then he pulled Brumhilde to his side, declaring that she was his property and he could do whatever he wanted with her. As he spoke, Candy even raised a hammer, acting as if he wanted to kill Brumhilde. However, a businessman is a businessman after all. He immediately changed his tone, demanding that the dentist pay a high price to buy the slave girl. If he didn't agree, they might end up taking a bullet. The dentist had no choice but to obediently hand over his wallet and sign a contract for $12,000 US. After that, Candy put on the airs of a victor. The dentist sat silently in his chair, not saying a word, listening to the sound of the piano playing, as if mocking him. The dentist walked alone into Candy's study. On the bookshelf were many works by Alexander Dumas. Many of the names of the black slaves here were taken from them. It seemed that Candy was a huge fan of Alexander Dumas. Since he couldn't use force to solve the problem, the dentist used words to provoke Candy. The dentist bluntly said that Alexander Dumas was a mixed-race person with black ancestry. Hearing this, the smile on Candy's face gradually disappeared. Not only that, but the dentist added, I and others use the German to say goodbye, showing respect. But today, I will use the English goodbye to bid you farewell, Candy. Being insulted like that, Candy definitely wouldn't let the dentist leave so easily. So he ordered his men to block the dentist, saying that there was a rule here. After completing a transaction, both parties must shake hands. But the dentist refused this request. According to him, shaking hands with Candy would be like becoming his accomplice. However, in Candy's eyes, the dentist was just a sore loser who couldn't accept the truth. Because of his pride, he forced the dentist to take the initiative to shake his hand, or else he would kill Broomhilda. The dentist was a stubborn man who wouldn't be easily subdued. But in this situation, he had no choice but to pretend to agree. However, as he moved forward, the dentist quickly pulled out a pocket pistol. Before Candy could even react, a bullet went straight into his heart. Seeing this, the butler was the first to rush over. OM lay Candy and wailing mournfully. On the other side, the henchman reacted quickly and opened fire. A gunshot sent the dentist flying back. In an instant, the situation was completely out of control. Seeing his friend killed, Django seized the opportunity, grabbed a gun, and began a furious massacre. With each gunshot, the white men fell one by one. This place seemed to have become Django's stage. At this point, Django had completely lost control. Even facing many people alone, he didn't flinch. Before long, he had wiped out almost all of the white men. However, the butler took the opportunity to order his men to capture Broomhilda. Under duress, Django had no choice but to surrender. Not long after, Django was stripped naked and hung upside down from the rafters. Not only that, but a white man was about to use a knife to cut off his manhood. Just at that critical moment, the butler appeared and stopped it, but he wasn't there to plead. Being a black man himself, he knew a more cruel way to punish him. Instead of letting Django die a quick death, it would be better to sell him back to the white men who ran the mines. What awaited him would be endless days of suffering, worse than death, where he could only work tirelessly in the mines until he died of exhaustion. But he underestimated Django's intelligence. On the way to his new owner, Django wasn't even allowed to ride in a wagon. He could only follow behind the guards, tied up with ropes and dragged along. If you looked closely, it was clear they were just taking Django off to get rid of him. During a rest stop, Django proactively struck up a conversation with the guards. Seeing that they didn't know anything about the things he had done, Django began to brainwash them. I'm just a bounty hunter. I accidentally wandered onto the plantation while tracking a target and ended up being enslaved. After saying that, Django even took out a previous bounty poster and fabricated a story about the criminal. The three guards were half convinced by Django's lies. Then Django played his final card. Just let me go do this job. After it's done, I can give you all the bounty money, tens of thousands of dollars. Under the temptation of money, the guards finally couldn't resist and were swayed. At this point, the black slaves traveling with them also started to chime in. When they arrived, he was riding a horse and carrying a gun, with a white dentist accompanying him. Hearing this, the three guards finally decided to trust Django. Not only did they agree to go with him on the job, but they also gave him a gun and a horse. Unexpectedly, as soon as he got the gun, Django took action, sending two of them to their maker. Immediately after, the third one, who had reacted in time, was also shot dead on the spot. After dealing with the guards, Django once again regained his freedom. The black slave who was being transported with them was stunned by the scene. Django walked to the wagon decisively, mounted a fast horse, grabbed a rifle with a case of dynamite, and then charged straight down his path of revenge. Galloping on horseback, Django felt the taste of true freedom for the first time. At this moment, Broomhilda was being held captive in a shed. The white guards at the plantation gate were leisurely playing cards. Along with the sound of dogs barking in the distance, Django pushed open the door and entered. After a brutal round of action, all the guards were easily taken care of. Afterward, Django found the dentist's body and retrieved the bill of sale for Broomhilda. He took a moment to remember his fallen friend. Next, Django rescued Broomhilda, who was being held captive. But it wasn't over yet. Django had already set an ambush in the mansion. Waiting until Candy's close associates returned from the cemetery, Django calmly appeared on the stairs. A few shots took down all of Candy's men and his family. Seeing the black slaves trembling with fear, Django didn't chase them to kill them all but let them leave. At this moment, only the loyal old butler remained in the room. The current situation was closely related to him. The ironic thing was that the two of them called each other black, as if they weren't of the same race. The butler threw away his cane. It turned out that all these years, he had been pretending to be lame to make himself look harmless. The reason he dared to be so calm was that he was sure Django's gun was out of bullets. But what he didn't expect was that Django had another gun. Django didn't choose to shoot him dead immediately, but fired 2 shots into his legs, making him a real cripple. Although lying on the ground moaning continuously, the old butler continued to spew hateful words, just like he had treated him before. Django didn't give him a quick death, but lit the fuse of the dynamite he had hidden earlier. Then, Django turned and walked out decisively, enjoying the brilliant masterpiece, like fireworks blooming. Once everything had settled down, Django led Brumhilde onto the path of freedom. At this moment, Django was finally and completely freed. Django Unchained is an American action drama film written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, starring Jamie Foxx and Leonardo DiCaprio, released in 2012. The most interesting and subtle point in the film is having a German dentist go and rescue black slaves in the American South. This contrasting imagery powerfully contributes to highlighting the film's theme. The dentist represents the absurdity within a civilization. He's like a righteous outlaw. Django, on the other hand, represents the absurdity of the clash of barbarity. Django experienced 2 liberations. One was being freed from the plantation, which was no different than a prison, and the other was freeing himself within his soul. In the first stage of liberation, Django was still trapped by the mental limitations of a slave. He was resigned to the slave owners who had bullied him and his family. Therefore, when facing white people who had no grudge against him, he still maintained an attitude of fear and respect. But after the dentist's death, Django entered the stage of liberating his soul. At this point, he was like a completely transformed person, facing the white men escorting him. He could turn around and shoot them dead without hesitation. He could calmly blow up the white people's houses. Even with the old butler, a black man like himself, Django no longer showed mercy. The dentist was not only the liberator of Django's body, but also the guide for his soul to be free. It was the dentist who taught Django how to properly perceive his own identity. In reality, the one being liberated wasn't just Django. He represented those who had escaped the yoke of slavery, and at the same time, he also represented the brutal slave system behind it. Therefore, Django, on the one hand, represents the liberation of Django as an individual. On the other hand, Django's story will undoubtedly awaken even more black people, and ultimately they will be freed. However, hidden behind these bloody scenes is a message about the pursuit of freedom and the struggle against injustice. Whether it's being physically bound or imprisoned in spirit, as long as we dare to resist, we will all be liberated. The value of a film lies in its reputation, while the value of a film review lies in the insights. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What did you think of this film? Leave a comment below.